some of the shit they were saying is pretty funny. Like, cause it's just like the most generic, like, football cheering ever.
Right.
Just don't come in here with the weak shit, baby. You know. Just...
Yeah. Totally. Like you could come up with it. You know.
Yeah. Or just apply to any game. You know.
Well, cause even like.
Yeah. How the fuck you jump down?
Just so you guys know, the Army-Navy football game is happening right now, and me and Graham are hungover, so we're hanging out in a dark room above my neighbors who are watching it. And, every couple minutes, they yell out some kind of garbage.
Yeah, they produce very generic football noises, and we think it's fucking hilarious.
Boom Squad, 2004, 5, 6. As we go, a little something like this. Fresh, wet, cause reality sucks. I'm lacing up my space boots instead of fly green chucks. Wrecked out my mind from dust blunts. Oh no, I'm bent once again, mixing ill with hydro. Getting pretty aggy, ran through the baggie. 2 blunts later, Tammy goes batty with Saudi Alley.
This is the New Low News Show. I'm King Kobe.
MC Graham.
Unfortunately, Adam cannot be with us today, or at least he's not answering his phone. So, through the magic of Audacity and audio editing, I will drop Adam's voice into the recording. Somehow, I'll figure out a way to do it. But I wanted to talk about something, and it's wildcat strikes at New York City fast food restaurants. Apparently, the people behind it, organizing it, is a group called Fast Food Forward. Mm-hmm. The previous 2 Thursdays, hundreds of workers walked out of their jobs in New York City demanding $15 an hour and the right to organize a union. And they were joined by other already unionized workers in solidarity. And there hasn't been any mass firings or anything like that. So I wish them the best. I mean, that's the best way I could put it. Wildcat striking is I'm really excited that's coming back into vogue.
Yeah, there are attempts, I guess, with more formal unionization tactics and stuff like that, and now it's like we're just gonna walk off the fucking job.
Right. As far as I know, there was a campaign to unionize delivery drivers, pizza delivery drivers in particular, a couple of Domino's. That was unsuccessful. Because I know this personally, because I actually personally tried to organize Papa John's. I failed to do so, and then I left the state, but that was, life happens. Last year in Minneapolis, the IWW was organizing at Jimmy John's. And Jimmy John's is notoriously sort of Monty Burns-ish with their treatment of workers.
We'll pay, you were telling me earlier in the car how if you worked, you had to work 10 hours to get a shift meal, which is just essentially a cold sandwich.
That's all they have there. Jimmy John's is tasty, but their workers are being treated like shit all over the country. You had to work 10 hours a day, technically speaking, to get a shift meal. My employers allowed us to have one after 8 hours, or if you worked 8 hours, but that was just out of the goodness of their heart.
Yeah, they didn't have to do that. They could have been like, just go home or pay full price.
Right.
One of the things I think is interesting about attempts to unionize fast food work right now is that 10 years ago, it would have been pretty difficult to do because it's pretty high turnover.
Right.
People only had the job for a little while before they moved on to something else or switched stores or something like that.
The idea was you work a summer in fast food to pay for, a cassette tape player or something.
To go get, a new CD or what have you. And that's all changed. And so now people are keeping their fast food jobs for a lot longer. So it's easier to unionize because it's less like, this is a transitional part of my working life to this is it.
Yeah. I got to earn a living here.
Right.
And there's no reason, when you look at the profits that these companies bring in, that they couldn't afford to pay their workers more. And really, the minimum wage is incredibly low. I remember working in the Bush years when it was $5.50. Now, that was, insultingly low. But $7.25 isn't much better. Obama, in his first term, did help to raise the minimum wage, although he promised in the 2008 campaign to have raised it by $9 an hour by 2012. And, well, here we are, right? So $15 an hour for restaurant work isn't too much to ask. Ironically, that's more or less what I make at my restaurant job, but I just work for a small business, so they just have a bigger heart, as the case usually is.
Well, it's like, you know, how are we going to keep the wheels on this whole sort of situation if no one can really afford anything? Like, if a certain percentage of your income is eaten up with rent, then another big chunk goes out to gas and then health insurance if you have it and stuff like that. And at the end of the day, you're not left with a lot for discretionary spending. So it's like,
I can only imagine, in particular in New York City, trying to make a living on minimum wage, or even significantly higher than minimum wage would probably still not be enough. And you also have to consider that we are a service-based economy now. We don't really manufacture. Not to pile on Obama too much, even though I tend to. You know, he can tour a master lock factory or something and say, look at all the great American jobs that were preserved or created or exist here. But most people work, I think 1 in 4 Americans is a low-paid worker, which is classified as less than $20,000 a year. That's not much to make it.
Yeah. Well, and it's not much to build a society around.
Right.
You know, whereas people, especially because it's like we were told when we were in high school, either you go to college and then you'll get an awesome job, or you don't go to college and you'll get a shit job. And now it's like you go to college, you get like if you're lucky, you get a decent job maybe, but you're very also likely to just get a shit job.
Exactly.
Or you don't go to college and you get a pretty bad job as well. So it's like the available options for people have, I think, really diminished since.
Right, and hopefully they're developing a consciousness of that. And not all is lost. I mean, if you look at the early part of last century, when this country was going through rapid industrialization, there was tons of labor battles. I mean, every labor-related thing that we get, overtime, the 8-hour workday, that kind of thing, that all had to be fought for. That wasn't a guarantee. If they had their way, you would be making no money for working all the time until you died on the job in a workplace-related incident.
Yeah. And yeah, I mean, that's another thing, like how dangerous a lot of those situations were. It's like, oh, you hurt yourself on the job. Okay.
That sucks for you. And I can't say that fast food work is that bad. However, I have worked in fast food, and I have seen some shit. When you talk about it, too, a lot of these employers are the only people willing to employ ex-convicts, which there are a lot more of, considering the drug war and just sort of the state of things as they are right now. Just like to say, I met some interesting characters that worked in food service. Maybe you have too.
I think part of the thing that's holding a lot of the situation back is the fact that people that work in food service, you know, are characterized as unsavory types. Like, why do they deserve $15 an hour if they're, you know, transients, ex-convicts,
well, that's
drug
the thing.
addicts?
Whenever you get into the argument, like, what does somebody deserve? It's not necessarily about that. They have an interest to make as much money as they want. Their employer has an interest to pay them as little as possible. Those interests will always be in conflict. So the way you deal with that is you try to organize, have a wildcat strike, something like that. You try to get negotiations happening.
Yeah, well, that's the thing with, like, American society in general. You know, you're told to pursue your self-interest except for when it comes to certain things. Like, suddenly you say, I want more money. It's like, oh, you're just being selfish. It's like, well, what the fuck is this whole society about? Or if you say you don't want to go off and fight in a war because you don't want to get shot at. It's like, oh, you gotta look past yourself, you know, do the right thing for me.
Yeah, sacrifice for this country that doesn't even treat you very well. So it's all a lie, I think is what we were saying. The American dream's still nothing.
Right.
Although, anybody who's trying to make it more than nothing gets my personal approval. Not that I will contribute monetarily or go and help them or anything like that.
But you will repost some things on Facebook.
I am a prolific reposter on Facebook. Speaking of fast food, Graham, if you'll indulge the audience, I see you're drinking a liter of cola there.
Yeah.
Where'd you get that from?
Panda Express, which I got earlier. It's one of the large sodas I think you can.
Yeah, let me get a hold of this thing.
Yeah.
This is quite a monster. Although Graham seems to have drank most of it.
Yeah, no, I drank most of the alcohol last night, so I need to replenish. Probably if I had my choice, I would use a drug with maybe less nerve-wracking side effects. Something that didn't dehydrate you so much, make you feel so sort of out of sorts the next day. But my options are pretty limited in America at the moment, so that's what I kind of went with.
Boom Squad.
Kobe, did you know there's a risk with caffeine?
Yeah, sometimes it makes you, like, shit a lot, you know?
Makes you feel kind of fucked up, you know?
Yeah, you can be over-caffeinated. I've definitely done that on many occasions.
Yeah, you're just driving down the street, just gripping the steering wheel real tight, as everything seems to be moving a little too fast. The glare seems to be a little bit too intense. Now, I'm not talking about just over-caffeination. I'm talking about there are people out there who are claiming that you can fucking die, that it can kill you.
What?
Yeah.
I mean, it could, but don't you have to take, like, a whole bottle of caffeine pills, like, on purpose to try to kill yourself?
Well, no, I saw this story in New York Times, like, last month. Talking about a girl in Maryland, actually, who died after drinking, like, a Monster energy drink.
Okay.
And then they submitted the story to the FDA. And the article just went into all this stuff about how people don't really know the risks behind caffeinated drinks and all that sort of stuff. What they left out a key detail, which is that the girl had a genetic disease that causes heart problems, you know, which is a pretty critical thing you'd think you'd want to discuss.
I believe there's actually warnings on some drinks saying not to drink. You're a person sensitive to caffeine.
Right. And they tell you, like, to fucking, like, watch out, you know? Like, don't just slam them. But that's the thing. Like, it was obvious for me when I was reading the article that they're really just trying to fearmonger and stuff like that. And
well, they've been making this case against energy drinks in particular. Like, there was the whole thing with people dying after drinking Four Loko, but they would leave out the part you'd have to read the article to see, and 2 bottles of vodka.
Yeah.
So
and chugged a Four Loko and then immediately got in his car and was found dead. Cause of death being acting like a fucking moron, you know?
They like to pile on the energy drink companies, but interestingly enough, a story I saw this week involves a New Jersey middle school, heavily Asian New Jersey middle school. That was a hot tip from our friend and listener, John Fang.
Yeah.
They were selling the children a Marley Relaxation drink. I've seen this shit in the stores.
Does this work at all?
I thought they didn't, but apparently some children actually got, like, sick, complained of wooziness, and so I guess they do work. We should probably pick some of that up and try it out.
Yeah, you, like, started reading the side effects. You're like, wow, I gotta get my hands on that shit.
The side effects include lethargy, sleepfulness, or it's like, I could go for some of that.
You know, heavy body load, you know? Like, yeah, submit, like, a trip report on Arrowhead or something.
So we will experiment with that on next week's show, but...
Yeah, and also in the case of student health, there was something that you posted about how the American Public Health Association was talking about how military recruiters shouldn't be let in schools. They signed some declaration.
Yeah, well, war is bad for your health. So.
Yes.
War.
You know, I mean, you can get shot at, you get shot, you can die, but also these conflicts we're sending people into seem like specifically designed to cause you to go nuts. Like, imagine you're driving down the street. You don't know if there are enemies watching you. You know, you assume they are. Things could change from
War.
like being relatively calm to like total chaos and anarchy in like a second. IED or whatever could go off. You don't know who's a friendly. You don't know who's an enemy. You might accidentally shoot an innocent person. Just wheel around with your gun and just.
There's the possibility of friendly fire too.
Yeah.
It's no surprise that 50% or so of veterans come back with some form of PTSD. You know, if you're not allowed to smoke a cigarette or drink a beer, you shouldn't be able to join up with the military, you know, when you're a teenager.
Yeah.
I remember seeing recruiters at my public high school and being very pissed off about it. Not because I don't think maybe some kids didn't have an interest in joining up, but they could do that on their own time or...
Well, yeah, that's the thing. When you're in school, you're a captive. You know, you can't just get up and leave.
Right.
You know what I mean? So it's like, you have like military recruiters coming in, and I especially imagine they want to talk to someone like you because you didn't have any interest in going to college, you know?
Yeah,
so,
after I graduated, I'm not sure how it works between the various bureaucracies, but I got tons of stuff in the mail, both asking me to join various military branches, particularly the Air Force. And also I got a lot of stuff from police departments, Baltimore City Police and so forth. And, you know, I ignored all the requests, obviously, but if I was to respond to them, I would say, I am not interested in killing anybody. I'm not going to hold a gun. I will not be the jackboot stomping on the face of humanity. That you guys could do that if you want. Yeah.
I'm a good liberal, you know? That's your choice.
War.
That's what gets you off. That's fine.
Boom squad.
So, Kobe, we have WMDs in Syria. Does that sound in any way familiar over the past decade?
Absolutely. I remember Colin Powell and Dick Cheney in the Bush years very well. I don't want to. I wish I could forget, but I remember.
Yeah, well, I think the big difference is that Syria actually has weapons of mass destruction. This we're pretty sure of, because they've come out and said.
Did they show a chart? Did they have a PowerPoint presentation?
Did they have a diagram of a bomb? They held up in front of us in a patronizing fashion or whatever.
War.
But yeah, they have WMDs and
what kind of WMDs?
War.
Poison gas. So this is the poor man's nuke. Not like kind of the
poison gas. What is this? 1905.
Yeah. No, they're like kind of like the off-brand Super G version of a WMD, but it's still classified as such and capable of causing great harm.
War.
There's a civil war going on with rebels that we support, and now we're suddenly getting concerned that these terrible weapons might fall into the wrong hand. It's like, this might have been something we should have brought up like last year when we were busy egging on the quote-unquote pro-democracy forces and.
Oh, and no fly zoning Libya. We're a little distracted. Yeah. So what is the fear of these WMDs? Is Assad planning on using them, or is that the claim that's being made?
Well, they're actually two separate fears. The first is that he's going to use them and quote-unquote slaughter his own people, which is the exact same line we heard about Gaddafi when he was threatening the people of Benghazi. And the second concern is that these weapons are going to fall into Islamist hands and then could either be used in the country or be used in international terrorism. Because Syria is right next door to Israel, and so we don't want anything crossing that particular border.
War.
So it's kind of like, say you're an evil dictator or something like that.
I would like to be able to say that.
Yeah. Just imagine, if you will, that you're an evil dictator. What options have you really been left with, given the way previous evil dictators have been handled? Like in the case of Gaddafi, he was paraded around the streets.
Oh yeah, look it up on YouTube. It's quite a scene.
Yeah, with motherfuckers on their cell phone cams, like watching you get knife raped or something like that in public. And then if you're Saddam Hussein, you have a trial at least, but then you're just randomly grabbed and hung.
That's also on YouTube.
Yeah.
What an age we live in.
So it's like.
So yeah, you either get killed in a gruesome way publicly, for the whole world to see in an instant,
or you just press the red button. So it's like at the moment, like if I was sitting back, like watching the rebels, storm my city or whatever, I'd be like, you know what, fuck it, I'm just flipping the switch. Or that's just one thought that might cross your mind, because we haven't given people a lot of like ways that they can extricate themselves from situations.
Absolutely. Yeah. So in a way, our policy towards them sort of creates the conditions in which they have to or feel compelled to perform a massacre.
War.
Right. And it's kind of like the same thing with Iran and a nuke. Why would Iran want a nuclear weapon? It's like, have you been watching like what happens to countries that don't?
North Korea has a nuclear weapon.
Yeah, notice we never talk about quote-unquote regime change in there, because it kind of affords you a level of protection, respect, that sort of thing from the international community. Even if people talk about how evil you are, it's one thing to be talked about. It's another thing for them to start funding your enemies or going at themselves and overthrowing you.
So what side are we allegedly supporting?
War.
In Syria, we're allegedly supporting, and this is something the State Department says completely unironically, I don't even know how they can at this point, we're supporting the pro-democracy forces in Syria. And it's like, what? There aren't any pro-democracy forces anywhere. Not here, not in Syria, but they're like
war.
People that are fighting for freedom and voting and the Chamber of Commerce and
apple pie,
Army, Navy, football, all the things that we care about that we suddenly assume that everyone else cares about. Really, the way I look at it is it's like on one hand you have Sunnis who feel like they're oppressed, and on the other hand you have the various other religious minorities who know that if the Sunnis come to power, they might get discriminated against, and all that other sort of stuff. Like one of the worst things that Americans assume is that when an oppressed group comes to power, they're just once they're rid of their oppression, that's good enough for them. It's like, aha, I'm equal now. That's never the way it works. What happens is an oppressed group comes to power, and they remember all the shitty things that were done to them by their former oppressors, and often they're still living in the same country, so then they want some sort of retribution.
Right.
So we think that people are just striving for some sort of equality when really often they want retaliation.
War.
I support Assad. That's my whole point here.
No, after a certain point, I kind of see where he's coming
right.
from. Like when he says that Americans are engineering that there's an international conspiracy to like overthrow his government. It's like, well, there kind of is, you know, like the Saudis, they're funding, you know, the Gulf states, they're funding a lot of these foreign elements that are working as mercenaries.
War.
We're every day getting on TV saying that he has to go. I mean, how would we feel if this shit was happening in our country? Like, imagine what if the Occupy Wall Street protests were taken as a sign that Obama was illegitimate or something like that, and then you had every other country in the world saying,
yeah, calling for regime change, step down, Obama, let the pro-democracy forces take over.
War. Boom Squad.
So, Graham, do you remember the D.A.R.E program?
I do.
Did it keep you off of drugs?
Not really. I was actually pretty anti-drug when I was in school for like a long time.
Me too. Even when I was being quote unquote educated about resisting drugs, I already didn't care to do them.
Yeah, but even though I resisted them, I still resented the program. I thought it was like fucking stupid. Actually, my only real distinct memory that I still have is the program encouraged xenophobia.
Oh, yeah.
You know, because one of the stories was like the kid shows up at a party and everyone there was like dressed differently, and how that was supposed to be like a warning sign that these people were up to like no good. It's like
a reason to be suspicious.
It's like you're not teaching kids to stay off drugs. You're teaching them to like be shallow fucking assholes. You know? Like,
yeah. So it wasn't written very well to begin with, but then also the actual effectiveness is not very good, obviously. However, just this week, D.A.R.E America declared that it was going to be dropping most of its drug content from its teaching of 5th and 6th grade students. Why they decided this is because if a child doesn't already know about a particular drug, because why would they? If they have no exposure to it in their family or anything, they're not really curious about it. But if you teach them about it, they're more likely to become curious about it. And I always had this impression too. When they were teaching me about the particular drugs, like I remember looking at the lists of positive and negative effects and reading all the, euphoria, hunger, like all the stuff for pot and be like, that sounds pretty awesome.
Yeah, no, they probably make pot sound more interesting than it really is. You know, its real effect is it makes you feel fucking tired and spaced out or whatever. But yeah, no, the list is like, you know, makes you fucking mellow, man. You know?
Right, so the D.A.R.E program, in effect, teaches kids to be assholes, or kids feel pretty alienated from the program to begin with.
And also if they get the impression that their peers are using drugs in large quantities, then they don't want to be left out. They don't want to be the only sober person. So it might actually make them...
And there was also the thing... one of the methods that they proposed for resisting drugs, like in a group or party setting, is the broken record technique, which is when somebody offers you, let's say, a hit of some fresh Mary Jane, you say no. And then if they continue to do so or talk to you about it, you just keep saying no. Or if they ask why, you say no. And it's like, what kind of asshole would do that? Well, I've been offered drugs and turned them down quite often, and it wasn't that difficult. People, it's more for them. They don't care. Nobody needs you to do drugs with them.
Well, I'm wondering where all the people are going around offering people drugs.
Yeah, I've never been offered.
Like if I was just like walking to work or something, would someone be like, "Hey man, you want some lewds?" Like, that'd be fantastic. No one offers me drugs now, or very rarely do I get the...
Yeah, so I'd almost prefer the magical, mystical world that the D.A.R.E program suggests.
Yeah, pot is awesome. People are freely trying to give it to you.
And that's the other thing. I used to be a straight edge, and I was still an asshole, and I was bad in school. I skipped school often. I broke things. I shoplifted actually often when I was a teenager. I rode BMX, so I was doing property damage, and I was under the influence of no drugs. I was just aggressive or something.
Yeah.
Maybe if I'd smoked a little pot, I'd probably do better at school.
Yeah, you'd be able to concentrate.
Yeah, if I had a beer, I'd settle down and do some homework.
Instead of just thinking to yourself, man, I don't want to fucking be here.
I don't want to do anything.